this is very late, but I did want to talk about it because it's something that I was very annoyed with. So, Tekken 8 saw the return of Heihachi Mishima, and while as a villain, he's very well written and very well rounded, being, absolutely evil and written well, they also made this point throughout each title that it's leading up to this big event where it's either going to be Kazuya or Heihachi. And while it is one of the greatest rivalries, it was leading up to this big spectacle. The thing that I have a problem with is that just got sidelined, just like a lot of other things. So let's get into it. The first game focuses on Kazuya training his ass off in order to beat Heihachi. He enters the King of the Iron Fist, where Heihachi does not realize that he's still alive because when he was younger, he literally threw him off of a cliff. So Kazuya gets his revenge and throws Heihachi off a cliff and gives a little smile. Also, fun fact, during this era, Paul Phoenix was Kazuya's rival and Kazuya was a sneakerhead. Anyways, the second game has much of the same where he throws Kazuya into a volcano because, you have to rev it up. And then he looks at the camera and gives a little smirk. Heihachi was such a menace that come in the third game, before Jin even awakened to the devil gene and realized he had it, he just, exacerbated it and made it worse by trying to literally fucking kill him, his grandson. And mind you, that's after Ogre already killed June in the story, and that's after Heihachi has raised Jin practically as from a child to adulthood. Well, in the game, Jin's like 16, so he literally just, offs him, and then like, whoa, you start reading into it, you're like, well, Heihachi's just a bad dude. So then the fourth game comes around, and you find out that it took a long time, but the Devil Gene actually saved Kazuya from the pits of the volcano. In other words, that was the only shred of existence he had. So G-Corp finds him, Dr. Abel, rather, and they rebuild his body. He's all scarred up and everything because he's just basically put together from pieces. And in this game, they focus on Jin, the Devil Gene, and they start introducing the fact that the Kazama bloodline within him is also counterbalancing the Devil Gene because Kazuya tries to, basically pull a Darth Maul and Darth Vader, just try to suck out the life force, and it doesn't work. And at this point in the story, Kazuya and Jin were supposed to fight one another, but Jin just disappeared and Kazuya was left standing there, so off he went to fight Heihachi. So he ends up winning, which means technically Kazuya should be running the Mishima Zaibatsu, but that doesn't work like that. They end up going to Hanmaru, where he can just go and try to get the Devil Gene, but the Kazama bloodline stops it literally midway through. Now, Jin awakens and he whoops the shit out of both of them, and as he's ready to finish it all off, his mother appears and basically saves their life, even though they really don't deserve it. They really do not deserve it because of everything that's happened. Like, Kazuya could care less about his son's life. Heihachi could care less about his grandson's life. And they're destroying the world and doing all this crazy shit. So instead, Jin is technically declared winner. The events of Tekken 5 happen with Jinpachi, which, mind you, that's Heihachi's father, who is fucking deader than shit and comes back because of the devil curse. But Heihachi is in search of the Devil Gene, which all started with his wife, Kazumi. which is introduced in part of the big build-up in Tekken 7. Now, my problem is that you have this gigantic build-up. You build this game around it. Now, I know they did it with Tekken 5 where they're like, hey, Mishima is dead. But this is completely different. This is completely different. You have the build-up, the whole story centers around it. It's not just like a small reveal. Everything that happens in the story leads up to this one moment where the two have this big battle. And it's supposed to be the end of an era, which I think would have been so good because Kazuya could be just as evil as Heihachi, if not worse, really. I mean, Heihachi is well written, and the things that he's searching for and the ambition he has, well written. I love Heihachi as a villain. If you hate the villain of a game, he's written well. Or they are, depending on who it is. They're written well. And Heihachi is written very well. The thing is it's one of those things where they have all this story and all this bulk just to throw it out the window. The whole point of this story was that he was finally going to get his get back, and he was finally going to get revenge, because little did we know, Heihachi also kills Kazumi because of the devil gene and tries to siphon out the power from it. Okay. And that's why he throws Kazuya off the ravine, which we don't know in the first game. This is all, we get all this story and all this past bulk in this game. So it throws all of that to the sideline. It throws everything that happens here as null and void. And I know it's late, but I literally just played this a couple days ago, got all the footage because I couldn't bring myself to do it. Again, Heihachi written very well, but at the same time, the whole point was for Kazuya to get the get back and finally triumph and see what kind of new evils lurk about. And the thing that made it worse was, like, characters that were introduced in 8 got the Asuka treatment, where they could be the most interesting character and then they're just washed to nothing because now you retconned it and did something else. Characters like Reina, Zafina actually plays a bigger part of the story, which is nice, but Asuka and Reina are like jobbers now. Asuka is like a random somebody instead of being important to the Kazama bloodline, and Reina we'll get into. So starting this DLC pack off, you're playing as Eddie Gordo, which you find out fights Devil Kazuya at a certain point in time, leaves him kind of half dead after Eddie joins the Tekken force, and that's his ambition for going on. Lydia, who is the political leader, saves him, and Yoshimitsu is randomly part of the whole thing. So they're trying to get the Tekken force together to kind of rally everybody up. Upon getting there, Lars really wants to see if he's about it and decides to throw them hands. And Eddie's game plan is actually a lot of fun in this game, where he's not so much a button masher. You kind of have to time your attacks out, and it's very interesting. Lars gets whooped but decides he ain't no bitch and decides to go for round 2, and guess what? He gets his ass whooped again. So then afterward, Lars declares that he's worthy and shows Eddie the ace in the hole. Guess who's back? Back again. It's Jin Kazama. And basically Eddie doesn't even think about it. He's like, guess what? I'm gonna whoop your ass too. And it's not without reason. I mean, Jin did have Eddie do the Tekken Force, and he tried to save his master but couldn't. However, a lot of things happened that were negative. Jin had to draw out all the sin from the world to summon Azazel or Azazel and basically try to fight and take down this demonic entity. And Eddie just forgives him and they brush it off. So after that happens, they're moving on to South America to get their Tekken force, you know, brought to their side as well, just to find out that G Corp beat them to the punch. And who do we have? We have a very familiar face. That's right, after swapping sides, Nina is now working with Kazuya, where at first she was working with Jin, but Nina is always going to try to fight for the winning ticket. She does not fight with losers. So she fights Eddie Gordo to test his mettle and gets whooped in the process. Eddie is declared winner. She kind of just, walks away from the situation. Or does she? I'll give you a hint. That doesn't happen. So going back, Eddie finally gets to meet with his old crewmates that he just rescued. And he basically tells them no matter the sins of the past that they committed, there is always time to move on in the future, and then no matter what people face, they can rise again. Okay, the thing is that gets said way too often in this DLC pack. I understand it, and it's a very inspiring thing, but it gets said quite a bit. Anyways, going back to it, Nina kind of flies in on a helicopter and taunts Eddie, saying, hey, guess what? I forgot something. I got a special present. So Eddie kind of gives a who what, turns around and sees the jacks and the missiles, and defending his crewmates, he gives them the biggest shit kick in the world and actually saves everybody, which is fucking awesome in my book. You just gave a character that was a side character a big buff in the story. And after all, his story was sidelined for a bit, so I'm very happy with it. Eddie was able to make it out, and with the winds of Capoeira, he's able to extinguish the flames. So he's reunited with the crewmates, and needless to say, he gets all the support from the South American Tekken force. So chapter 3 begins like chapter 2 did, where it's up in the air, but this time you're playing as Lydia, and she's got the scoop on this secret organization called the Tekken Monks. Who are the Tekken Monks? Well, we're going to find out here in a little bit. So up till now, everything is fine. You get story on Lydia, which is fine because she's main for me, one of my mains, and you kind of get more background on what she's about and who she is, what she's done to the story thus far. And then you get more additional story for Eddie, bulk in between what happened in between the events of Tekken 3 and 4 and what happens after Tekken 5 and 6, which I think is nice because during that era of Tekken, mainly the focus was put onto Christy. So now we pan back to Lydia. She's on the phone and she sees information on G Corp. She also looks at her family, which triggers a flashback and also gives you more insight on why her resolve is the way it is. So here's where it kind of takes a turn for me, and we're kind of getting the effect that Heihachi is impacting the story in a not so good way. So you had this character Reina throughout most of the main story in Tekken 8 being vengeful, being kind of sneaky, but at the same time having the ambition and the will and the power to take down Kazuya and partly Jin too, because she's kind of against both of them because of what happens to Heihachi. Now all of a sudden she's just an informant. She's just there to say, oh, I have this letter from Heihachi. He's really changed. So she starts being all shifty as they're standing there talking, and Lydia's kind of thanking her. And she's like, oh, we have an audience. People are watching. And then all of a sudden she wants to fight. So Lydia takes the dub, and then Reina says it's time, flips out of the way. All of a sudden these staff start appearing around her, and Lydia hears this voice telling her what a great job she did. There's black smoke pouring out of these staffs, and then it's revealed that it is the Tekken monks, in fact, watching this display of power. Now, it's really never explained what the smoke is. However, things start to change and reality starts to shift right before you have to fight the monks, and they just kind of pop out from each staff. So after having a multi-battle with each monk, you kind of get told different things about the aspect of your fighting style, your technique, and then the last one is just your body is honed to perfection, which is okay. So after the whole battle is finished, the smoke starts to clear, and all of a sudden the staffs disappear. Hey, that rhymed. Anyways, you hear the ominous voice once again of the Tekken monks saying, "Come and find us." But no other information except for "come and find us." So she looks away and then we move. So this part of it has the most story thus far. And basically what's going on is they're looking for a peerless warrior to train Heihachi. Because, well, Reina knows that Heihachi survived, but Lydia does not. So she kind of keeps that from her. And notice behind Lydia is one of the staffs. Even though they all disappeared and turned into the monks, and there was no staffs left, all of a sudden there's a staff. So Lydia takes the staff, hardens her resolve to look for the monks, and then she moves. Chapter 4 starts in the most annoying way possible by Lydia, Eddie, and Yoshimitsu finding their way to the Tekken monks area. And it's like, okay, well, how did you get there? Because to my knowledge, there weren't any hints. There wasn't a little trail of candies that they said, here, follow these all the way to the certain Zaibatsu, and then we'll show you the secret monk technique. No, that didn't happen. They just said, come and find us. But this DLC gives us the biggest bad thus far, that being Seiryu. Now, Seiryu is meant to train you to kind of reinforce your power, and it makes me wonder, why didn't they choose Seiryu to learn the hidden technique? Because honestly, he's like the strongest opponent you will face throughout this whole thing. He's hitting you with 10-hit combos, he's like crushing the earth with each step, but yet they choose busted-ass Heihachi, like barely surviving from the volcano, to be the hidden technique master. So you fight Seiryu to see if your technique is on par. So after defeating Seiryu, black smoke starts pouring out, and they say basically, you know, you did great, you did well, but honestly, you need to do better. So we're going to train your mind, we're going to test your mind. So they start pouring the black smoke, and it takes her to a certain point where in her mind is like her biggest demon, biggest fear, which is obviously the one that's been ruining everything, which is Devil Kazuya. Which up to this point I had no idea that her story tied into Devil Kazuya, and that was a part of what happened to her father. I had no clue until there's a certain point in this fight where you win the first round, and then all of a sudden you're told to sink into the pit of despair. You get hit with like a little 7-hit combo, and she starts really thinking about it. And that's when it dawns on you. Devil Kazuya had a lot to do with what's going on in her life too, and why she is the way she is, and hardens her resolve and wins the second round. Finally deeming it worthy, she unleashes her special attack, the Rage Art, and basically you see little flashbacks of the past, earlier games, earlier points of the DLC package, and you're ready. You're ready for everything. Now you did it. You beat the mind, you beat the body, you beat the technique, so now you're ready to meet with the one and the only
こちらにおわすのがそなたに合わせたきお方である。
That's right, my fellow fighters. It's Heihachi Mishima, and obviously it would be, because that's what the whole buildup is for the grand return. Now you find out a lot more information this time around about the bloodline and how it came to be, I guess. You learn more about the fighting style, that it has origins in Buddhism, in being Zen, in being balance, being the destruction, and also being the blessing kind of ordeal. It makes you wonder, originally, not now, but originally, where Heihachi landed as far as one of the two clans, because Jinpachi, Kazuya, and Heihachi are all evil as shit. Like, there was no balance between it. They're just self-centered, self-righteous, self-operating. Anything that has to do with self, that's what they are. So it is nice to see Heihachi kind of training and kind of figuring out his own, you know, pacifist way, I guess, because they lead it up to where he's changed. He's not the same Heihachi he once was. But things don't always last forever. So let's go ahead and dive into a little bit more of that. So this is the part of the story where, things start to get a little jank, and it starts to be like, I seriously fucking doubt that. But anyway, you go to Heihachi, who is meditating, and Brother Seryu is trying to convince Heihachi to learn this secret technique, which only one that's mastered the mind, body, and technique can learn. Now we know that they said Lydia was trained to perfection, but it has to be Mishima bloodline. So this means that I guess all of the Tekken monks are related. Now, be that as it may, they start going back a little bit of ways. Obviously, this is only taking place 6 months after, and you see this scene here where Heihachi is falling, and then all of a sudden Seryu saves him. Now, okay, just a little thing, a little bit of a thing. Let's just go back to that ending and see why that doesn't exactly make sense.
戦いとは最後にどちらが立っているか、それだけだ。
Kazuya, the one that fucking threw him in, is standing right there. He mastered the Mishima technique, he's got the devil gene, so if anybody would have sensed anybody else's presence, it would have been Kazuya. So that's just completely, it's almost blasphemous to say all of a sudden his powers didn't work because of some mystic bloodline when Kazuya is a part of it. Now, if you had a third party introduced and it was somebody else that did it, I would understand. Be like, okay, well, it's something that's in tune with that bloodline or whatever. But it's not. It's literally not. And then the devil gene on top of it, you gotta be fucking kidding me. That's just stupid. But anyway, Seryu wants to make sure that you indeed are ready, you being Heihachi. So you fight him, not once, not twice, but 3 different times. Because, you have to train all 3, the mind, body, and technique. Because even in this moment right here where he's about to claim victory, the past Heihachi is telling him to finish him off. Be done with it, and basically, get rid of him forever. And, you can't have that. You can't have that when you're being all zen-like and you're being all peaceful. And obviously the Heihachi of the past is dead. And that's the whole coinage of what happened in the past 6 months, is that the Heihachi of the past is dead. Which, sure, whatever. If you want to do it like that, that's fine. But everybody knows that it's not going to stay like that because he's already wavering. He's already wavering in these moments where it's just a sparring match and he's already like, yeah, kill him, do it, do it.
今の平八殿はかつての三島平八にあらず。記憶を失い、今は心清き三島流剣士として日々修行に励んでおる。
Czy to może mieć związek z jego utratą pamięci?
いかにも。全ては我ら鉄拳僧の悲願成就のため。
Przysięgi?
Okay, so this part of the story kind of revs up to 11, 12, maybe even 13 because of how much is actually soaked into this and how quickly it's all laid out rather than being a slow burn. So this point of the story, Heihachi is facing the Star Crusher trial. That's what all of this training has been for. That's why they sought out Lydia. It's all for this trial. And at this point, Heihachi is, fighting the demon within, you could say. He's fighting the evil that lurks within his past self. So, in a rush of haste, instead of doing things properly, they're going to resort to a forbidden technique, which was their first mistake. If they would have done things properly at this point, it would have played out fine. However, they resort to the forbidden technique and then just force Heihachi into the false reality that Lydia was once placed in. Now, for Heihachi, it's not the same as Lydia. It's everything that's happened these past, well, at this point, 7 games, because he wasn't involved in 8. But the 7 games that he was involved in, it's all the culmination of that. So you have plenty of flashbacks. And one thing that I do enjoy is while you're fighting at this point of Heihachi, like while you're fighting as him, some of the moves are different and some of the style is different. I do enjoy that. I do think it deepens the story along with the gameplay. It kind of makes you think, but it's not really that much changed. Now, what I do like during this fight in particular is that certain points, whether you have a crushing blow or the enemy does, they'll end up saying a quip or a line like you think, a pathetic incantation, conceal me. Heihachi, the dark Heihachi you can call it, says that he is the king of the Iron Fist, while Buddhist Heihachi is saying, he's going to master the technique no matter what. I do think it's a nice little battle. I do think that the things involved are interesting. I just am not a fan of how it all came about. I do love Heihachi as a character, as a villain, and if they took this arc and completely ran with it, I think it would have been interesting, but they did not.
ついに真の武人にふさわしき心を身につけられたようじゃな。必ずや最終奥義を体得し、正当な三島流を復活させてくださり。
リディアの明日の最終稽古お願いします。
So for whatever reason, even though they had 6 months to plan this all out, they decide the day of, when they bring Lydia in, that they're going to go ahead and practice matters of the heart, meaning purifying the heart. They had 6 months. 6 months to prepare for this, and they break it down to the absolute last second, waiting until they had an outside influence. But over the last millennia, they haven't had to wait for any fighter to go through this same trial in the same circumstance. So why is it so different? I have no idea. But they start sparring, they get ready and into stance to purify and cleanse Heihachi's heart and get him ready for the Star Crusher trial. That's, what is that called? A Mad Lib? Tongue twister. That's what I meant. Yeah, say that 3 times fast. But anyway, throughout this whole battle, you can see like the smoke emanating from him becoming clearer and more clean, you could say, purified from the evils within, which means he is now finally ready for the Star Crusher trial and ready to decimate the meteor.
200年に一度だけ落ちる隕石を打ち砕く星砕きの試練ついにこの時が訪れました
Zanim zaczniesz, mogę cię prosić o przysługę? Czy po zakończeniu próby dołączysz do nas i staniesz do walki przeciwko Kazui Mishimie?
正しき三島流の復興には三島和也は邪魔な存在じゃ最終奥義ならば悪鬼の力そなたたちの言うデビルにも対抗できよデビル今のはいや消えすまい三島和也とやらの少年は私が叩き直してやりましょうぞいざ行かん星砕きの試練へ
The beautiful mountaintops show range, and it also shows Heihachi in his meditative state, still being good guy, not knowing that up in the literal fucking galaxy, Jin and Kazuya are having the clash of a lifetime, an earth-shattering performance, almost literally because they broke off an asteroid. So what happens is, he has no idea what's going on up there. He's just ready for this Star Crusher trial, which is to just crush a meteorite that occurs once every undisclosed amount of years, which is just too perfect for this situation. But anyways, as the meteor comes careening down, Heihachi is blessed. He's thinking, oh yeah, this is it. This is my time, here and now. He's gonna push it back. That's his original train of thought. I'm just gonna hold it. I'm gonna get some force to it. I'm gonna push it back. At least that's what's going on in my head as I see this. And then knowing that that's not gonna work because he's just getting pushed, he headbutts the fuck out of it and gets thrown back into the past. And that, my fellow fighters, is what leads us to this deadly culmination of events. Of course, they weren't going to have him stay peaceful for long, so what happens after? Well, that's what we're going to cover now. What happens after is they hear the rupture, and they hear everything that happens, the meteor getting pierced, and so far, it's just that the mission is successful, but Lydia has a bad feeling, so her, Eddie, and Yoshimitsu start running amok. The sight really is one for sore eyes, as Heihachi is defeating each and every one of the Tekken monks, the last one left helpless, just toying with him, saying, here's a technique you can play around with, before finishing him off, and Lydia, Eddie, and Yoshimitsu are left looking at the waste of what was, everything in the brutal path of Heihachi, and that's when they see it for themselves, Heihachi holding up the last of the monks thus far. And who knew it? Heihachi was going to become evil again. I mean, who would have thought? And he tells you right then and there, everything that you've done, anything that you worked for was all in vain. Because I come back, I stay ready. And that's the evil within, the darkness within him. And that's what makes Heihachi complete. No amount of meditation, no amount of culmination or anything can make him ready or make him peaceful. He's always going to be who he is. Now, again, written well, I just don't like that it took 7 games for there to be one ultimatum and then you just wipe it away. So now it's time to battle. You play as Heihachi, which feels good. You're in like the most powered state you can be. You throw Yoshimitsu into a pit of lava. You beat the hell out of Eddie, but Eddie does not give up. Eddie comes back for a second round. They actually do a lot of good with Eddie in this story. I'm very surprised and I'm very happy about it. I'm here to see it. But as the story goes, Heihachi does win and slams him into a statue. Then it's time for Lydia, who is like the second main character of this DLC pack. Lydia takes all the practice that she learned while being with the Tekken monks and utilizes it in this stage with Heihachi. Now, Heihachi being the master of it, stands no chance. No chance. There is nothing standing in the way of Heihachi and his ultimate goal. Now that he has been reawakened in this state of pure evil, so he counters and brings about his own rage art. And it goes back throughout all the time of Tekken just for this moment of reckoning and just bam, it's over. It's done. Yeah, that's it. Anything else happens after that? Not really.
Nie możemy pozwolić mu.
約束通り和也の少年はわしが叩き直してやろう。あとあやつの血が目覚めれば全てわしの計画通りじゃ。
All in all, it really wasn't bad. I just don't like the lack of continuity, and now you make all these characters mean nothing and have no ambition for what's to happen next. The whole sole focus is going to be put back to Heihachi. Now they could pull a double whammy and say, well, you know, none of it really happened. It was just kind of like a dream state before he died or whatever, but that's a big if. I think Heihachi obviously is just back for good, even though at this point in time he is just DLC. Will there be another story pack? I believe so, but I don't know how much involved in the main story it's going to be, considering this took place in between, you know, the events of Tekken 8 all the way up to the last moments. So where could it even go after here now that the Devil Gene is mostly expunged? I have no idea. But with that, everybody, I'm just not happy about it. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate you all. 1K gang, let's go.